what we're discovering is it's technically not hard, but it's hard enough where there's barriers to adoption. What does that look like, for the average person? What is coding going to look like in the future, and what tools do we have? And that kind of landed on the whole Claude and Anthropic universe, starting with MCP, then going all the way down to Claude Code, and then kind of trying to get to the bottom of, okay, well, is this yet another thing that's going to replace engineers? Yeah, right. To, my God, this changes everything. And then, so now I'm firmly in the camp of, okay, I started saying yes to a lot of things I shouldn't have said yes to a year ago. And then I said, hey, that's a great idea. I know you don't have any money. Maybe we can spend a day or two or a weekend and then see if we can cobble together a little app in a good way, not vibe coding, but maybe the way a CTO would build stuff. And then what comes out of that is there's a lot of marginal apps or business ideas really that need a little bit of software to flourish or get started that were below the margin historically. They're now above the margin. I think we're going to see this blossom of business ideas from non-technical founders.
Some people build technology, others build perspective. My guest today, Todd Morell, does both. He's a software executive, private pilot, and a host of the Sky Lounge, where conversations happen above the noise. From early cloud innovation to mentoring teams shaping the future of AI, Todd brings a rare vantage point on leadership, clarity, and what truly matters. Let's get into it. Todd, welcome. Thank you for being with me and looking forward to our conversation. Took a listen to your podcast, the Sky Lounge. It's brilliant. You've talked to a bunch of really interesting entrepreneurs and people, and I learned a lot just from the couple episodes that I was able to listen to before you and I are meeting here today. But before we get started talking about that and all the business consulting that you do and whatnot, introduce yourself to the audience for people who may not have heard about you and the Sky Lounge.
Yeah. So I'm Todd Merrill. I'm the host of Tales from the Sky Lounge. It's a podcast about business consulting and venture investing. We talk to people about getting out there in the world and making things happen. And I think, in the modern world, everybody's on Zoom all the time, and we kind of forget that there are people out there, and, sharing space with somebody, going out for a meal is very important. And, we have to remember that people are humans and humans want to be together. So I'm a fractional CTO. I'm a consulting CTO in the software industry. So I love talking about software and making things and building companies and all things technology.
Todd, I think I was reading in your biography, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're also a pilot?
Yes. Yeah.
So pilot, technologist, mentor, all of that. Is that where the Above the Sky Lounge idea came from? Because you were always at that altitude?
Yeah, I'm in Atlanta, and Delta has great Sky Lounges, but the whole idea for the podcast was I know a lot of really cool people, and I don't want to necessarily drive an agenda, and then a lot of these very senior people that I interview are often the quiet ones in the back of the room. They don't ever get to tell their stories, right? They have to make decisions, and then that's all you ever hear from them. So I thought, how cool would it be if I had no clue who you were, and then we just happened to be sitting next to each other in our Sky Lounge in some city, we're out there doing some kind of adventurous thing. Is like, hey, who are you? And what do you like? What do you do? And then, those kind of conversations really are fruitful, and you learn a lot about people. And then, there's a lot of people that want to share wisdom, but don't always have the ability to share. So that was the idea for the platform. And then flying, has afforded me regionally, like I can go to one more meeting, hour and a half away by airplane, which would be like 3, 4, 5 hours by car. You wouldn't drive there, but for an airplane ride for an hour, like that makes a lot of sense. And it's kind of allowed me to go and be in person, be in the same room with a lot of people. And it's surprising what happens when you just show up a little bit more, in business.
Yeah. And, you mentioned not wanting to create sort of an agenda per se, but I wonder, what kind of conversations were you hoping to create that you weren't necessarily hearing elsewhere?
Yeah. Well, so my company is full of very, very, very senior, very accomplished people who've had the C-suite title multiple times. And then oftentimes they've started lots of companies. And then a lot of our clients, of course, are very successful. So that's pretty rare air. And, those kinds of people aren't writing blog posts. They're not often talking on their own podcasts, or, you have to really dig for what their opinions and thoughts are. And a lot of them don't, write a book. They just are busy doing their thing. Right. And then so, I have access. And I thought, how cool would it be to pull those stories out?
So a few of the conversations seem to revolve around, I suppose, seeing patterns. And I wonder, how did you personally distinguish between what would be considered the noise
Hmm.
and the signal, or especially when everybody is shouting, this is the future, especially about AI and whatnot? How do you differentiate what is really needed to come out in those conversations?
Yeah, well, everybody's got an opinion. A lot of really smart people are trying to figure it out too. So a lot of times we'll talk about things like, hey, venture investing seems to have dried up, or maybe it dried up, maybe it didn't. And if I'm talking to a CFO up in New York City, they have a definite point of view, and then so it's fun asking those questions like, hey, I don't understand this. Can you explain it to me? Or, what's your opinion, or where are we going, or are we in a slump, or is it, regional, or, how do we get out of this, or when do the good times come back, or is it fundamentally different now because of X, Y, or Z?
As a consultant and working as you said, a fractional CTO, what does that look like coming into a startup or a company?
Yeah. So I work from very early startups all the way up through lower mid-market, private equity backed companies. So it's very different sets of challenges. And I think particularly in the technology with a lot of this new AI has impacted software in particular pretty, pretty heavily. So a lot of people are trying to figure out a lot of things. Early stage companies, it's really less about, can you build a little piece of software and then we'll go figure it out. Now it's becoming more about, do you understand the business? Do you have friends that are going to buy this from you? Do you have distribution channels that you can take this product out? And if so, we can describe what the product would be because you already know the clients. And then building the product is not as hard or expensive or time intensive as it used to be. And it's about getting out there in the world. They get the other end of the curve, established companies that have been around a couple decades, or even 3, 4, 5 years. Technology that was built 3 and 4 and 5 years ago even is starting to become obsolete, right? And then so the way we build software is so fast and so violent now. A lot of people are having to come to grips with, what is this going to do to our business model? Just because you have software doesn't mean you have a moat anymore. Death of coding is a competitive moat was one of the papers I wrote. But so there's a lot of interesting dynamics out there in the world.
Talk to me about that, because you did mention it off camera as well, the death of coding paper
Mhm.
that you wrote. Explain that to me.
Yeah, so I kind of went on a journey of discovery this year, trying to help some of my non-technical C-suite peers figure out practical AI.
Hmm.
That's the bucket I'm going to like label LLM and related technologies with, because I think there's more than just LLM in that. We're seeing desktop tools that are super powerful now, where people in average jobs can have access to what we used to have to hire a couple IT people to bang out custom applications for your big business. That power is now available to everyone. What we're discovering is it's technically not hard, but it's hard enough where there's barriers to adoption. And then, so what does that look like, for the average person? So in the extension of that is, okay, what is coding going to look like in the future, and what tools do we have? And that kind of landed on the whole Claude Anthropic universe, starting with MCP, and then going all the way down to Claude Code, and then kind of trying to get to the bottom of, okay, well, is this yet another thing that's going to replace engineers? Yeah, right. To, oh my God, this changes everything. And then so now I'm firmly in the camp of, okay, I started saying yes to a lot of things I shouldn't have said yes to a year ago. Right. And then I said, hey, that's a great idea. I know you don't have any money, but maybe we can like spend a day or two or a weekend and then see if we can cobble together a little app in a good way, not vibe coding, but like maybe the way a CTO would build stuff, which is important differentiator. And then the what comes out of that is there's a lot of marginal apps or business ideas really that need a little bit of software to flourish or get started, that were below the margin historically. They're now above the margin. I think we're going to see this blossom of business ideas from non-technical founders. And it's important, like, your customer, what the problem is, you have access to distribution channels you can sell, rather than, oh man, we need to raise $250,000 and spend 6 months, or $1 million and, spend a year to make this complicated piece of software. So that's not how you start companies anymore. Now it's like, hey, let's concentrate on the business economics first. And then maybe we can supply a little bit of code very rapidly, get you in business, and then pour it on once you have revenue. And then so you can get to product market fit a lot quicker.
Let me ask you a question about coding, dive a little deeper into that. Because I'm a little bit familiar with machine learning, and you have an extensive experience in that. Um, about a year or so ago, I was working with somebody, and what he was explaining to me was somebody where the AI was at that point a year ago was if someone submitted code to him, he could tell because he would say it's not what he called clean code.
Hmm.
And I wonder, from your experience, where is it now?
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's approved where maybe he can't tell any longer, or where is it now from what you've seen?
Yeah, the good question. So it's rapid innovation. So if you hate it now, just wait a month or two or a couple weeks, it'll change. So I was skeptical too for a while. I think this is the or 2025 mid year. It got
Mhm.
pretty good. Late in the year, it got really good. And now it's shockingly good. And then so if yes, you can tell that AI generated a repo, repository, um, but it's not because it's junk, right? I'm talking about the elite coding models, right? And Claude Code's one of them. There's a couple. Um, they're very well documented, which a human tends to not do till later. They have very good test suite, which humans tend to defer. So yes, they're differentiated, but they're differentiated in a really good way. And then so if you so we talk about like Lovable and Replit and things like that. So if a marketing person has an idea and says, "Hey, here's a paragraph about, you know, an app that I want generated," without a lot of technical detail, you're going to end up with some really weird code, right? And it's just going to fill in the gaps and make a bunch of assumptions. And then, so yeah, that code is not going to be great. But if you do plan, and then what I like to do is I like to interview people and record a couple conversations and then iterate a little bit. And then once we get very crystal clear on what it is we're building and why and for who, then we do a little planning research, generate some artifacts that describe the business process and then the customer and the motivations, all that product management stuff.
Uh-huh.
And then you take a couple of those documents. And then right now this is context engineering is what we're talking about. So you take these documents and only then give them to coding tools along with me as an experienced CTO, a couple of, run books on how I like to build things robustly, right? And then you get a much different, it's a giant magnifying glass, right? So if I'm very talented and I understand business, I understand product, I understand how to code and architect and all those things, it's going to produce wonderful results very rapidly that are very robust. If you don't spend the time and effort and know what you're doing, you could end up, it's a blind dart throw over your shoulder. Good luck, right? You can end up anywhere in a lot of bad places. So, I mean, it's a discrepancy. And, the quote was, it's going to make 10x, it's going to multiply, right? So if you're a 10x engineer, it's going to make you a 10,000x engineer. If you're a 0.01 engineer, it's going to make you a 0.00001 engineer. Really, really bad, right?
Think that actually makes sense to me. And I'm not a technical person, obviously, but I'm big on using AI to duplicate myself to save time. And I've created, with the help of a tech person, certain GPTs
Hmm.
that are task oriented, that it knows exactly what this task is and knows me personally and what I'm doing. So as I put in whatever the prompts are, it knows it. So I have, for example, a clarity GPT, and it's literally a GPT that helps me to get clear on anything by prompting the questions based on the concept of clarity, for example. So I use it, like you mentioned, as a non-technical person, a lot of the AI from that perspective. I wonder, for you as a consultant, do you find that the companies are resistant to using it? And how do you overcome that as, being their consultant?
Right. And it's an interesting question, right? And everybody's very curious about it. The C suite and up, board of directors, investors, all in, let's go, in a very abstract way. And then from the like just below the C suite and maybe some of the C suite down, the further down you go, everybody's kind of scratching their heads going, yeah, we read those articles and it doesn't do what you said, and then so, 2 or 3 years ago, it was Microsoft Copilot, very early entrant, probably not current. It's definitely not my favorite right now. It's underpowered, doesn't do right. Yeah. So, um, the people that got out in front almost kind of stumbled and hit their face. So everybody's had a bite at the apple, the aggressive ones, and kind of went, "Ooh, that's not what we thought it was going to do, and it doesn't do what you say it's going to do." And then there's a lot of very aggressive people. So, like to use your GPT example, everything was a chatbot for a minute, and then we can extend it, and then that's neat. But there's another layer, right, where you can introduce this concept of MCP tool usage, and then maybe context engineering, where imagine if it could go look at your calendar and then transcripts of all your meetings, and then look at your last 10 emails, and then go, okay, let's review this week. Who did you talk to? Let me go do web research, come back, look at your emails, look at your transcripts, and then figure out all the to-do items, and then go do research, and then give you clarity on here's your top 5 things in the green bucket, top 10 things in the yellow bucket, and then the rest of us kind of defer, right, to somebody. Would you like me to email your assistant? So you can do that. You can do that, right? But then the technical hurdles to that are just high enough where you're not going to do it probably, or you're going to need some help. And then maybe you have to make a decision. Is this worth investing in? So what I'm finding is a lot of companies are interested. I always ask people, what's the most grindy part of your job that you emotionally just hate doing? It just drains you. Let's start there and automate some of these things. And people just want to buy a solution. Everybody's used to buying a SaaS thing, right? And then so we've got to kind of break out of that habit. And it's all the way back around the circle to the old days when everything was custom installed software, or your Geek Squad, internal Geek Squad would cobble up these apps, to match your exact process. So that's a lot, right? And that's a big chunk for a lot of these companies to absorb. So I think there's a lot of really, really good technology. I don't think the world, it went too fast, and it's arriving too fast. And then so the rate of absorption isn't sufficient. Like it's going to outstrip so there's going to be a few people that get it and are going to crush everything. And there's going to be a lot of people that just can't or won't absorb because they're too busy running their business. They're going to wake up one day, and wonder where all the customers went.
Right. You know, what I've discovered and how I've approached it is, I think what people don't understand is you need to learn how to do it. I think the part that they're missing is it's just going to do it for you. Yes, it will, but you have to know how to get it to do that. And I actually learned how to do that. There were actually methodologies and courses to teach you how to do it. And the analogy that I always share with people, because within my network, I'm not a consultant like you, obviously, but I have people who own businesses in my network that ask me for my advice on how to do it because they see what I've done. And I said, think of it this way. I'm going to use a comic book superhero analogy. If you go back and you watch Iron Man, and you watch Downey with Tony Stark. Jarvis is his AI. He's a genius. He's brilliant, and he's literally telling Jarvis what to do, but he has the knowledge to do it. He's just telling Jarvis to do it as he saves the time, more as though he's a director. But if he didn't know what the right answer was, he wouldn't know whether or not Jarvis gave him the correct solution. And there were even times in the movies where he'd say, Jarvis, do I need to reboot you? Like, what's going on? Because he's questioning the answer because he knows what he expects. And I think that's the part that I think is part of the resistance that you probably get. You know what I mean? Where people, they don't really know what the solution would be. So when it's presented, they can't tell if it's bunk.
Well, and then people have trouble with abstract too. It can be anything you want. Yeah, right. And as a software guy, yeah, I'm used to thinking that way. We'll build anything you want.
Mhm.
But a lot of people don't think that way. And then so it can't be anything because it'll be nothing, right? Or they don't have the imagination, or they don't understand. And then so doing quick demos of what it could be. And if I could take this and put it in a box, would this help your life? Well, yeah, and then getting over that hump is difficult. And I think you bring up another interesting point. There's kind of two schools of thought. It's like AI is just going to do everything. Go buy an AI agent and then name it and put it on your org chart. I think that's a huge mistake, right? I don't think that's the right way to go. I think it's always going to be really smart people or good people that get magnified or helped or amplified. And it's you as Tony Stark have to, you're the human, nothing matters unless we're helping humans. And then, his mission is to go fight a battle or, kill the monster or whatever. But he has a lot of technology that can help him. And then maybe have guardrails. Like, are you sure you want to do that? We're going to blow up if you do that. Yes. Okay. We'll do it anyway.
There was a book years ago, I think by Andrew. What was Andrew's last name? I can't remember, but it's about, he's talking about the strategic inflection points in different industries. Where do you think that happened with AI and machine learning over, say, the last 10 years?
So, machine learning means a lot of things to a lot of people. The vision, NVIDIA obviously was a big deal, back in the 90s. That was an inflection point. I don't think a lot of people understood what that was. TensorFlow coming in was at around, 20, I don't know, call it 2017, 18, somewhere in there. TensorFlow was a big deal. That was Google. Scikit-learn, some of these libraries came in. And then I think LLMs came in and everybody kind of scratched their head and went, I don't get it. Writing an email a little bit nicer doesn't move the needle in any kind of enterprise way, but it's fun, right? And then being able to do research is good, but hey, I got Google. And then I think for me, Q1 or maybe one Christmas ago was when MCP, Model Context Protocol, came in. Claude Anthropic proposed that as a standard where you can now have tool usage, right? So you can be in ChatGPT or like Claude Desktop, and you can hook it up to your HubSpot, or you can hook it up to your email, or you can hook it up to your calendar, or all the above. And then you can write a prompt that's like, hey, I just had a meeting. Go look at my calendar, figure out who it was, look them up, and then go look at my email, look at the last 5 emails for the things we talked about. Go listen to that transcript from that corresponding to that calendar, and then generate a statement of work based on what we just talked about. Like you could just type it up just like that if you have all those connections, and oh my God, it'll generate a statement of work in 5 minutes, which is pretty good. And then to me, that is a human productivity game changer. So the addition of MCP was huge. And then, so that was a huge inflection point that made LLMs, what they could be. And I think, the coding tools have gotten really, really good. I'm not sure exactly what day or hour that happened, but it happened, sometime late 2025. So that's been a big deal. And I think, we're going to see an acceleration of capabilities. Are we at AGI, all things to all people? No, I don't think we're going to go there with the current technology, but I think there's a lot of runway left with this, LLMs. And then for people who are builders to be able to build a lot of little ideas and then like watch them blossom, I think is, for me, on the business side of things, is going to be hugely productive and fun to watch.
Let me get your opinion on this from the human side of it. Do we run the risk of intellectually regressing as the human race?
Maybe, in some way it's so in software, we're always eating our young, right? In college, I learned to write assembler. Actually, we probably learned to write logic gates and then assembler, and nobody does that anymore. You don't need to, right? And then there's a compiler, and then compilers are kind of stupid now. And then we had a little bit higher level, a little bit higher level. So we're kind of used to abstracting out. And then, so to me, is that good or bad? A lot of people say, no, it's horrible. The art of the code is horrible. It's going down. Everybody's stupid because they can't write papers anymore. Well, yeah, but the reason we write papers in literature classes in college is to get you to think, right? It's not, can you construct the right sentences with the right commas or dashes or whatever? Not really. It's about critical thinking and going through and then having ideas and expressing them and sharing them and bouncing off each other. And then to that extent, we can get through the grind of what is this idea? Let me do a little research. Let me write a paper. Let me share it very quickly, right? So we can iterate a lot quicker. And then it focuses on the things we should be thinking about, the higher level things. This is a concept, should we be writing this software, or is this a business idea that is worth doing? And then that's really, if you think about it, what we as humans should be spending our time on is human things. Is this worth something, or is this valuable? Or like my son wants to, he's in music. So, he has trouble coming up with new ideas. So, can we generate some software to help, throw a bunch of ideas on the wall and he can kind of pick through them and maybe they're all horrible, but maybe one or two inspire him. So is that regressing or is that helping him, accelerate in a human endeavor? I think number two, right? If we focus on that part of it, yes. If we focus on the technical, oh my God, coders aren't coding anymore, that's horrible. Or, ad writers aren't writing ads anymore. No, they're not, but they're working on a higher problem. And if we're all working on higher, more human things, I think that's net positive. And then, boy, what a creative economy we're going to live in here in the next couple, 3 years.
Going further there, what conversations about AI as a society we're not having that, in your opinion, we desperately need to?
So trust and safety is a big thing. I don't think we figured that out. I talked to a lot of healthcare people, and we're just on the verge of, okay, what's ethical here? You don't want a one shot, a cancer diagnosis or, as an example, or some kind of complex disease. But if you have a really good couple doctors that are looking for alternatives of what did I miss here? The technology can come in and say, hey, you should think about these things. And the doctor ultimately can say, well, that's good. I don't know about that. And then maybe we should explore that, and then where's that line? And then you see other people, so like psychotherapy, talking to their chat GPT about, really meaty life and death things, super dangerous. Right. And then, if you enter some kind of rabbit hole of conspiracy theory or something, I don't know, it can reinforce, you can ask it questions and it's just kind of goal seeks. And then, it's just going to reinforce what you're trying to do. And then, get you in a really bad place. Things like that you worry about. And then that's just now emerging, and then I worry about, people ascribing personalities to the AI. It's just a tool, right? It's not got a personality. You shouldn't name it. I think that's
No,
ridiculous. No,
it's
I
not
don't,
a person. I,
no.
I had a person I was learning from once, and she kept saying, "Stop typing, please." It doesn't care. Stop saying, please do this. You're not talking to a person. I
Or
had
you're
to dumb that. Yeah, you're wasting text.
wasting tokens, but that's you need to be a human and you should not apologize for being a human. The tools need to help humans, not the other way around. That's not what they're for.
Right, right. Neither one of us are obviously in a position of power as far as regulatory, but I'm curious if the powers that be were talking to you, what are some sensible regulatory measures you would suggest in regards to AI and the current environment and what we're looking at?
I don't know. Europe had some forward-looking regulatory policies, and then they had to back away from them because it stifled innovation. So I
Yes.
do worry about going fast. We do need to go fast right now, but there's got to be some sensible guardrails, and I'm not sure what those are. And then, when we're innovating fast, people are going to take shortcuts, and then where there's big money, there's big fraud. It brings in the worst of humanity. I was talking to a guy that he's a venture capitalist, and he likes to talk about e-commerce and the future of e-commerce and shopping and buying. What happens when agents can go shop for things, and then you give them the ability to pay for things, right? And then so you know all the things we had to learn as humans, as children, of don't get ripped off when you're going to buy something, and don't share your credit card information. We're gonna have to learn. All the agents we're gonna have to make all those mistakes all over again. Bitcoin scams where you
Yeah.
call the CFO, hey, yeah, wire this real quick, and then the money goes away. All those things. There's going to be a lot of chaos and fraud and abuse that we have to be very, very careful about. Hopefully, a lot of the existing regulations are going to map onto future endeavors. But I things are changing so fast. If you regulate something today, they're just going to go right around it. And then so it's kind of a dangerous time right now. I don't know what I would, I mean, we need rules. I don't know what those rules should be. I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of dangerous, right?
Yeah, it's really scary for me. Like when I look at the US, it seems like the pendulum switched from one extreme to the next. Either we have 100% regulations or none. I've yet to experience a time in America where it's sort of sensibly in the middle someplace. It's just either one, we had the financial crisis where there was nothing going on, then you had the Dodd-Frank Act, where you regulated everything and then we swung the pendulum back. And that's the one thing that concerns me, this swinging of the pendulum from one extreme to the next is nobody putting their heads together to come up with something sensible and pragmatic. So I share your concern based on that. In regards to your experience in your consulting practice, right? What separates the leaders who thrive in this new environment and gets it from those who don't? What have you seen?
Um, there's a lot of subtlety there. We can go a lot of different directions. So, uh, you're seeing a lot of have and have nots, so if we're talking about AI and the new productivity boom, there's a lot of people that are really, really against AI and, it's a bubble and circular economy and it's wasteful and they kind of ignore the personal productivity benefits. And there's people that are going really fast and breaking things but generating meaningful new companies and then providing efficiencies and taking on projects that weren't possible a year ago or 2 years ago. So I think there's not that many people at the very top outside of software that get that, the capabilities. So, the last year I've been trying to go around to all of my non-technical C-suite peers, and it's been hard, right? People want to talk about it, but people aren't ready to move because they just don't know. So I think it's going to be a minute where we need concrete examples of things. Um, the fear is though, it's moving so fast. By the time you wait for a concrete example, you know, you've lost a whole generation of knowledge, right? And you're that much farther behind. Um, the people that I see succeeding are generally the ones that have had lots of different experiences. So like the CFO who went to law school, or the CTO who was in real estate, or the marketeer who's also a lawyer. These people have lots of different disciplines and lots of experiences um, that are used to innovating. I think are well set up um, for what's next, right? Because nobody's got all the answers, but you have to have willingness to stick your neck out a little bit, but also analyze that risk, because there are risks, right? And then it's unproven technology in some ways. And then what is that? And then mitigate the risk and try to go as fast as you can in a reasonable way. So and it's the same leaders that have always succeeded.
Mhm.
It's just new environment, right? And then the way that companies are constructed, it's going to have to change. Seeing like a lot of these layoffs in the big tech companies, um, are interesting to look at what divisions they come from. Some of them are in the older AI initiatives. They need to retool. Some of them are in old, dumb, parts of the company that are now going to get replaced by or augmented through AI. So yes, they're laying off, but they're rehiring a different mix of people. The ways we do things are going to have to change. So people are used to building interesting org structures or figuring out new business models. The entrepreneur mindset, I think, are going to do really well. I think the people that are rooted in the same old thing we've been doing for 20 years are in for a rude awakening. And you're seeing that all in the economy. People are just like, no, this isn't a thing. They're they're not having good couple years.
Yeah. Todd, switching back to personal for a bit, you know, you're a pilot. I think I also read that you did triathlon training
Yeah, yeah.
from what I remember. Obviously, mentoring, you got the podcasting. When you look at all of that and look at yourself, what keeps you, I guess, grounded on life and while everything is moving so fast
I think it's my
around you?
dog. My dog. It's getting out, reminding yourself daily you're human. It's about I think last 4, 5, 6 years, culture has gotten more and more crass and isolated. And little kids soccer teams don't go out there and play anymore. A lot of the social fabric has decayed for whatever reason. I think there's a variety of causes.
Hmm.
But getting out and talking to people and being in the world and, touching grass is a phrase, but I think there's something to that, right? Getting out, seeing the sunshine, doing things away from your screen time and doing human things. I think that's what it's all about. If you are so busy, in your business or, creating things or learning, that's all good. But, without balance and without, eating good food and talking to nice people and having dog walks and, you know, dog park activities or, going to the lake or the beach. What are we doing? Why are we on the planet? So it's important to remember that.
What's something that truism that took you a long while to grasp that when you look back now, it seems obvious?
I don't know. That's a good one. I don't know. I don't have any one. It's hard to think about what that would be. No, we're talking about writing a book. I'm gonna have to think about that and then
Okay.
come up with like
There's
20 of them.
something for you to ponder. Now, talking about the sky above the sky lounge on the podcast. What's your most? I would
Actually,
say.
I have an answer to your
Go
last
ahead.
question. Okay, so when I was younger, I was involved with a lot of type A, really go, go, go type people, especially in the startup world. And we used to have a saying, any 80 hours a week you want to work is fine, right? And then just work your ass off. And then the corollary to that is every company needs exactly one asshole, not two, not zero, one. And I think that's neither of those is good advice. And I think we're starting to learn that the better you treat your people, the better things are going to go. And then the company, like really, we don't need any jerks. You shouldn't have to deal with that. And there's a better way, So I think that took me a minute to figure out. And then, there's better ways to do business than that. Sorry. Yeah. So that
No,
was
no,
the
no.
one that kind of stood out.
That's a great answer. And I want to ask you a question about your podcast. But before I ask you the question, I want to share something about mine to help you with figuring out where I'm going with the question. So of all the shows I've done, interviews I've done, there was one that stood out for me for a reason that really had nothing to do with the recording. And let me tell you what that was. I interviewed a lady by the name of Kerry Jones Tretter. She was a former industrial CEO from Wales, moved to the US and completely switched industries and formulated like an art type of organization where she helped people and families come together and make things out of metal of all things. And she's based in Arizona. And we'd wrapped the interview and we were just having a chat afterwards. And she said to me, "Do you mind if I pray for you?" And
Okay.
I said, "Yeah." I'm just thinking, oh, she's gonna have me in her prayers or something. But she meant right then and there, can I pray for you? Because she started praying and she went through the prayer and I knew it was genuine because I felt emotion. I felt it. And we were not in person. It was virtual. So I know it was powerful. And the reason that stood out for me was she didn't know anything about me personally, but my mother-in-law had just had eye surgery, I think 2 days before, and the prognosis was not good.
Wow.
She couldn't see and we were worried and we were concerned. And she did that prayer, and I'm not kidding. The next day, my mom's eyesight was improving, and the doctor said, "Wow, the surgery went better than I expected." And for all the interviews I did, that's the one that just, when I think of my interviews, that's the one that just stands out, right? And my question to you is, of all the interviews you've done with the Sky Lounge, which is the one to this date that stands out to you the most and why?
So they all stand out in their own way, and I do get little bits of wisdom that help me every time. It's amazing when you talk to people and you just let them, ask them good questions and they can kind of tell you what they think. It's amazing how many little things in your life get unlocked and you go, oh yeah, I know who I'm going to talk to after this. But I think what amazes me is when you talk about the personal aspects of everybody, you almost always uncover some little nugget where you kind of go, whoa, I had no idea. So there's this one guy, Mark, he was one of my first guests, and he's a well-known he's VC here in Atlanta. And, I was talking to him and they run the state of the, investment in the region report. And I thought we were going to talk about that. And we did. And then I asked him about leadership. And then he said, oh, yeah, when I was on the Olympic rowing team, we did blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, my God, but like things like that. And it's surprising how many successful people had early success in something personal, often sports related, but it doesn't have to be. It's kind of neat. And then what lessons that teaches you for the future.
If you looking back on your career in regards to machine learning and software and whatnot, and seeing where you are today, what would you tell that younger version of you, say 20 years ago, say in 2000?
Mhm.
dot-com bust is the big conversation. I remember it.
Mhm.
Like, what would you tell that Todd today?
I can't say that on the air, but I could say I'm divorced. So no, I mean, I did a lot of the things that I wanted to do, and I'm kind of weird in that I always knew I wanted to be in software and create businesses to be an entrepreneur, and I've done that. I think my wisdom would be there's making money and keeping money are two very different skill sets, right? And then a lot of times, it's a very common tale when you talk to people who are very wealthy. They almost all have a story about how they lost their first million and then had to do it again, right? And I think it, is easier the second time around because you know how to keep it. And then so, figuring out ways to not be so aggressive. You got to be aggressive when you're younger. I believe that's true, but maybe not that aggressive, right? And then figure out ways to play defense with your money, and then surround yourself with good people. I think is always wise. Um, and who you're they say you're a sum of or a reflection of your closest five friends or associates. Just make sure that those are the right ones and you're heading in the right direction, and recognize that everybody changes and you walk with everybody for a minute, but you're the only one you're always going to be alone with for the ultimately your whole life. So guard that time and choose who you walk with.
Brilliant. Switching back to your consulting hat for just a bit,
Mhm.
I want to ask you a question in regards to your expertise. I recently had a friend of mine in New York City. He told me about this idea that he had,
Mhm.
which basically is, to sum it up, basically trying to revitalize the New York City club scene because
Okay.
it's not what it was. And he came up with an idea of doing it from a technological perspective using an app where sort of like open table for nightlife.
Okay.
So that's my idea. I connect with Todd and I said, well, I don't need a CTO yet, but I need help. What does that first conversation with you look like? Get that idea up and running.
So I don't have it right here, but I have a little recorder device, a digital recorder. I would go speaking to the microphone. Yeah. Tell me about your idea, press record. And then, and this is like I started doing this last year because a lot of people have really good ideas. Right. And then is that a multi-billion-dollar idea? No, because it's New York City. Right. And then, so is that, Andreessen Horowitz, Sequoia venture? Probably not, but it's a good idea. And then there's a lot of people that want that. And then, so well, it's good. Let's do it. Right. So I would say, speak in the microphone. We talk about it. I'm an angel investor. I'm an LP in various venture funds. So I know I've got kind of my heuristics about what I want to see and what's going to work and what's not. And I much prefer someone who understands business and has a good idea to a couple of Georgia Tech juniors. They're really smart. They can code. Like I don't want that anymore. Right. I want like, okay, tell me about your idea. Who's going to buy it? How much is it worth? How many of your friends have you talked to? You think you could sell 10 of these in a month if I gave you the software tomorrow? Because
Yeah.
I might do that. Right. And then just kind of, let's have a conversation. And then, okay, sounds good. Let me do a research before the sun sets. I will hand you your business plan the way you described it to me. And then, is that something, do we agree there's a business here? Because there might not be, right? Um, I did one where it was crochet graphics. So, making patterns in blankets, selling patterns on the internet, the top 10% make $211 a year. Like that's not a business, that's a
Right.
charity.
Right.
Okay. But if we figure out, yes, this is a business and yes, that makes sense. And then if I deliver phase one of software for you in a week, can you commit to selling 10 of these to somebody in the first couple weeks or a month? And then we'll figure out whether the dogs like the dog food at that point. And then only then will we go to phase two. So I've had that kind of conversation just to see if we could do it. It's gotten to be kind of crazy how deadly effective that is. Just walking through the business case, tying business objectives to technology. Yeah, you need a little technology, but not a lot, right? And then just get the dynamics down. If you have that and can describe it, we can make it. That's not the problem anymore. And then let's see. And then part of me kind of wants to go off and do like a, I don't know, venture studio or something. I don't think that's the idea, but like how many of these little companies can we start and just watch,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
So if
and
you
to
want
be
to do it, I'll do it with you.
and to be fair, he said start with New York City, but then expand to all major cities.
Yeah.
But start with that one city. And he said this is a person where, in all fairness, he was one of the top promoters in the area, and
Love
he's
it.
still his network. He said, "Man, if I had the software and if I had this, I can have this place just on my reputation. And now we've got this." And I said, "It's brilliant, but I'm not the tech guy."
You know, I'll do that. I'll do that live on the air with you if you want. I mean, it might take a couple hours. I don't know if that's a good program, but I think that'd be fun to do.
Fun to
I'd
do,
love,
yeah. Hey,
I
that'd be
would,
a good conversation for the Sky Lounge. I
yeah,
could connect both of you.
yeah,
Definitely. Good conversation for the Sky Lounge.
yeah. I'll take the challenge. Let's see what he can do. It'd be fun. It'd be fun. But I think that's happening a lot all over the place. And then why not? Why, if technology is the only thing holding back, why shouldn't he start that business?
Right.
Right. And
Right.
then, you don't have to have $100 million exit to have a good time, right? You could have a really good job. If you made $250,000 or $500,000 and had a couple employees that are doing it with him, like, what's wrong with that?
Why not?
Right. Right. And it's so capital efficient to start these things now. Like, I think the world's going to be a really cool place because you guys like your friend.
Okay. Well, Todd, any final words before we go?
Now get out there in the world, make something happen. Yep. That's my advice. We used to end our board meetings with go sell something to somebody.
I like that. I like that. That impacts the bottom line immediately. So I love it. Go sell something to somebody. Todd, thank you so much for being with me. I appreciate the conversation.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Behind the story.